Who here is in a DAO? Raise your hand if you're in a DAO. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep your hands up. If you're in a DAO, raise your hand. Cool. If you're in a DAO, wave your hand. All right, very good. Cool. Let's see. I think this is for me. How do I do this? All right. Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and get started. What I'm going to talk about today is how to help people fall in love with your DAO. This is not a technical conversation. This is a psychology conversation. My background is in behavioral economics. And I'm going to talk about how to give rewards wisely. Because it turns out that giving rewards, the cost of giving a reward is not just the cost of the thing that you give out, but it actually has ramifications across your DAO that you need to be considerate of. And there's been some very good learnings that come out of behavioral economics that we can apply here, and I've applied in my own community building. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is doing something for the sheer joy of it. Extrinsic is doing it for a separable outcome. This idea of separable outcome, I'd like you to remember. It's really the way you can identify something that's done for an extrinsic reason. So if you're giving someone tokens to, for example, retweet something, that is an obvious separable outcome. Okay, so here's a study that some behavioral economists did, or some behavioral psychologists did, that I've always really liked. So the first step here is, if you take children and you give them games, they play the games. That's intuitive enough, right? Now, if you give children money to play the games, they keep playing the games. Makes sense, right? They were already liking it, they're playing the games, you gave them some money, great. Now they're just getting money to do the thing they like. But what this introduces, and what they discovered, is actually this dilemma between intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Basically that, oh, I see my font didn't render on their service. Basically that extrinsic motivations can squish intrinsic ones. And so I think you can probably predict the next slide here. When you take away the money, compared to a control group, the kids actually played less. So you started out with kids, they liked the game, you started paying them to play the game, and then you stopped paying them. They stopped playing it as much. And that's a really fascinating result, because what that means is these kids actually stopped associating with the joy of playing the game. They started associating with the reward. And I think you can see how you might start to apply this when it comes to rewards programs in DAOs. Here's another example. If kids don't read, if they don't like to read, you start paying them, they start to read, right? You're paying them to read, they start to read. But when you need to ask this bigger question, right? You're not going to pay them to read the rest of their life. Paying kids to read is not equal to them learning to love to read. And so at UMA, which is the team that I'm from, I didn't actually introduce myself. I'm the community lead at UMA. At UMA, we think a lot about this. How do we get people to love UMA and also build stuff on UMA? So we have done many developer incentive programs which reward developers for building stuff. But there's this open question. Does paying developers to build stuff mean that they love UMA? So when you start to think about smart rewards, it really matters the type of task. So when we're talking about what people do intrinsically versus extrinsically, it matters what it is. So some things are just boring, right? Taking out the garbage at home is fairly boring. You get some amount of joy for the garbage having been taken out, but nobody's bringing in garbage intentionally to carry it out just for the internal reward of it, right? So those things need rewards when they're in DAOs typically. But then there's this other side of things. Is the reward necessary or superfluous? Some things are fun right away, like the games example. So when you're talking about getting people in your DAO to help sort of, maybe in that early stage when they're building a relationship, you can think about the tasks that you might reward are going to be the ones that are are boring. But here's an interesting one. Sometimes rewards are needed to get people to be motivated and competent. And what's very cool is that once they're over that bridge and they become competent, they are now that guy or that girl that people go to for help on this thing. And that circles back around to an intrinsic reward. What that is people getting to feel smart and also to provide value for other people. That's the beginning of someone falling in love with a community, because they're excited to share their knowledge. So this is a quote from Adam Smith that I've always really liked. Man desires not only to be loved, but to be lovely. My role as a community manager, when I use rewards, is always in the mindset of directing people to have opportunities to be lovely. This is not about people showing up just to earn rewards. They need to earn money, and if they're full-time DAO members, then they probably need a significant income. But it's not just about the money. It's about opportunities to be lovely. So this is a question for you all. If someone in the community is freely helpful, let's say someone asks a piece of information and someone provides it, is the person providing that information driven by an extrinsic reward or an intrinsic reward? Raise your hand if you think it's extrinsic, if they're just being freely helpful. One, we got a couple. Okay, so this is maybe fairly loaded. Raise your hand if you think it's intrinsic. All right. Stand up if you didn't raise your hand at all. Okay. So there isn't an obvious answer to this. You would actually need to look in their brains to understand the motivation. It's kind of funny in DeFi because of the airdrop retroactive rewards system that we've seen so often. People are doing tasks they think are going to be rewarded in the future. So it's kind of messing with this whole conversation in an interesting way. So here I'm going to talk a little bit about different types of rewards that you can give people and different ways to think about making the experience pleasant for people in a community. So there's things like gratitude and recognition. Those are fairly obvious. And so instead of giving someone a reward, you might just thank them, and they might actually find that more pleasant. Something that I really like, and I got this from Sinju at Dystopia Labs, is delight. So you could tell people, hey, I'll give you $100 if you do a Twitter campaign. Or you could just ask for help, and people give you help. And then you show up one day and just give away $100 by surprise. The psychological experience of receiving a wage for a task versus receiving an unexpected prize is very different and builds a really different kind of relationship in your community. Crypto economics are very important. So the way that I think about this is we have cryptography kind of at the top. That's what makes the SHA-256 algorithm in Bitcoin. That's what allows the cryptography system to work. But what really makes Bitcoin special is the crypto economics. That's what makes Bitcoin mining reliable for accurate block mining. Under crypto economics, we have economics. We just have normal economics, and that's paying people to do stuff. And then under that, we have what I call just like loveliness. It's people having opportunities to be lovely, to provide value, to be seen as smart, to be seen as generous. And I think that Web3 community building is at this intersection of economic incentives and pure-hearted intentions to contribute. This is a psychologist I like. He said that several studies have shown that autonomy-supportive teachers catalyze their students' greater intrinsic motivation. Autonomy, to me, is one of the most important things. To give people autonomy and to empower them to make decisions and own the results of those decisions creates a very strong bond. People are empowered to build cool things. They feel that the community appreciates them. And their motivations, the thing that they want to be seen as, in terms of being lovely, is to be seen as generous, to be seen as good, as smart, as skillful, and to feel helpful, and to feel like they're part of it. People want to be lovely. They can't do things only for financial reasons, but they also need to pay their bills. So that's the other part I'm going to talk about here. As a person who's done a lot of community building and rewarding people, I am always looking for good opportunities to pay people money. Spending money wisely is actually really hard work. Rewarding the right people who do hard work is difficult. but it's very important, right? You can't just rely on the loveliness of contributors and then your project moons and they're left behind, right? That would just be mean. So what do you use instead? Something that I've had a lot of success with is shared incentives. What that looks like is you might tell your DAO, hey guys, if we get to 100 million in TVL by the end of the quarter, then you guys will get X number of tokens, right? What that does in the context of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is it allows people to be earning money for outcomes, but when they're successful, they get to come back home to the DAO in Discord and say, hey guys, look at this win that I brought. And so they get these opportunities to show off their wins to the community, and that's very powerful. So, excuse me. I just want to introduce what UMA is here. So I'm on the UMA team, and a lot of the learnings that I'm sharing today are things I've applied in our community. UMA is an optimistic oracle. It's built on Ethereum. It's not currently on Avalanche, but it's essentially one of those cases where we will deploy where there's demand. What I'd like to share with you is that the shared incentives idea that I brought up a moment ago, UMA has actually tokenized that. And so you can mint what I like to call DAO derivatives that are collateralized with your project token and give them out to people now, and they'll pay off, in that example, at the end of the quarter based on your TVL. So they actually become transferable, tradable, and permissionlessly expire and mature based on the KPI that you specify. So that's something we currently do on Ethereum. This here is an interesting example of our oracle. If you scan that QR code and you retweet the tweet that comes up, you will plant a tree. Raise your hand if you hate the idea of planting a tree. Okay, that guy hates the idea. Everyone else should have their phone up scanning this, because you can plant a tree right now before the end of this conversation. What's happening here is we have designed one of these DAO derivatives, or it's actually a KPI option in this case, that will pay out at the end of this month $1 per retweet on top of this tweet. So if you scan it and you retweet it, you'll see it. You can read the thread. It explains how it works. But essentially, we've created a token, and it uses our oracle to report that piece of data back on chain, the number of retweets. You can sort of see how this example would fit in the context of community rewards. You can create rewards that pay out based on outcomes. Instead of giving this dollar to the foundation that plants these trees, we could give the dollar to the community and say, hey guys, if you get this other tweet up to 10,000 tweets, then your tokens will be worth more. So that's a certain product that UMA has been working on to kind of demonstrate the flexibility of our oracle. So I'm going to these are my last two slides. I just want to talk a little bit about our team. We are currently recruiting. We have several different engineering roles that are open, as well as a remote office manager. I really love working at UMA. I sort of divide my life up into 2 times, as before I started with UMA and after. It's been just an amazing experience. Really friendly, smart people. So we're always looking for talent. Here's where you'll go to open up another Twitter page that you can follow me and also see our open roles. And that is the end of this talk for now. And I will have a special prize for the first person to ask me a question. A crypto prize. The guy that didn't want to plant a tree. Okay.
I'm not against planting trees. I just think we already have plenty. Anyway. So a conversation that I've been having with a lot of other protocols, and I think probably everyone trying to scale a user base has this, is like how do you then interpret that ideal intrinsically motivated community who just loves doing what they're doing for building a Discord community as a case study?
Sorry, can you just repeat that bit? How do how do you sort of apply it, or how do?
Oh, so more context. Previous conversations I've been having, guys are saying, well, we're just paying people in either the token or in DAI or whatever to be Discord mods. How could we look at an alternative that's intrinsic?
Yeah. So I think the alternative that I suggested here was the shared incentives. And so what you're doing in that case is you are paying people to do it, but you're doing it in a very particular way so that everyone wins together. So instead of saying like, oh, this person did this much work, this person did this much, you choose a group of people, sort of like an airdrop, but they're sort of handpicked. So these people that you're paying to participate in Discord, for example. But instead of just giving them UMA tokens or DAI, you give them these KPI option tokens that will expire in 1 month based on the value of an outcome. And what you're doing when you do that is you're giving them this kind of camaraderie experience so that it's like, hey, I just got another integration, and everyone's like, yay, good work. That's the best hack that I've seen to basically give the extrinsic motivator and not squash the intrinsic motivation. Wait. Yeah. Sure.
Thanks. How do you build trust around incentives like the one from the trees? Because if I say retweet this and I plant a tree, I think I will retweet it for free. No, I don't expect the tree to get planted.
It's a wonderful question. Okay. So if I can just ask for another 20 minutes to describe how our Oracle works, that would be awesome. No. So basically, UMA's Oracle is secured by all of the UMA token holders. If there's ever a dispute on, hey, how many retweets were there, that dispute would be escalated to UMA token holders who would have to evaluate it. Their evaluation gets pushed on chain. Now, the really important piece here, though, and if you read the thread, actually, it breaks this down for you, because there's a thread behind that tweet, so you understand how it works. But essentially, the value of the UMA token has to be greater than the value that this is securing, or else it would be more valuable to bribe UMA token holders. And so there's what we call an economic guarantee that's making sure that exactly the question you asked.
If I find you're cheating me, I can make money of this.
You can trust that it won't be cheated, essentially. The decision-making process is now like set in motion. And as long as you can trust people to be greedy and want more money than less money, you can trust that it'll work. Thank you for your question. We have 1 more minute.
Okay, I have a question too. If you do this here,
Thank you.
This group rewards basically, and you create this camaraderie, isn't there also a danger of people, freeloading?
Freeloading is one of the most corrosive things that can happen in a community. The sense of unfairness is just like so powerfully bad, and it is absolutely a problem. The thing that it gets to, it's less about the shared incentive and it's more about who got it. And so if the next round, that same free rider is still getting it, then you have a problem. And this to me is probably the biggest problem that DAOs are facing right now, is basically, it's the same problem that every organization faces before crypto as well. How do we figure out who actually did valuable work? And I don't know that DAOs have cracked that in like any sort of special new way. But it's very important. It's an ongoing struggle. It takes a little bit of, I don't know, we're working on it, I don't know, is the answer to your question. I think we're out of time. Awesome. Thank you, guys. That was good.
All right. Thank you, Clayton.